I paid over $10,000 to intern in Japan for a summer. Was it worth it? I paid for the Santa Clara tuition externship summer program in the summer of 2024. And today we're going to go over how much it costs, what kind of program it was, the kinds of classes I took, my work experience, and what kind of apartment I lived at when I was studying there. So Santa Clara University is in the Bay Area, California, and they offer a doing business in Japan course plus an externship at a Tokyo law firm. I've had connections here for decades, they said, and they had various law firms that students could extern at for the summer. I wanted to do this program because I wanted to get some legal experience in Japan, and I wanted to kind of learn a little bit about Japanese law and the differences between contract law, con law, and criminal law. So at the time of second semester of my law school, I was studying at the University of San Francisco. I knew I was looking kind of for like international work experience that I wanted to get, and I've lived in Japan before and I really like living in Japan, and so I wanted to try and get some work experience out here. So I had to apply online to the Santa Clara study abroad program through their website, and then I had to submit like an essay application, and then I had to do an interview with their dean, show that I was in law school, I was interested in the program, and then what I was hoping to get out of the program. After I was accepted into the program, I had to put down a deposit, and then I had to pay for the entire summer's tuition. So I had to pay $1,250 per credit, and the class was 4 credits. And then you had to pay for each externship credit in increments of $1,250. And so I signed up for only one externship credit, and so I had to pay $5,000 plus the $1,250. So I had to pay $60,250. So for the class, we had various professors from around Japan, and then the class was taught in English. So there were teachers from Waseda, University of Tokyo, Obashi University, and each professor had like different kinds of specialties, and then that was the subject matter that they taught. So some that kind of stand out was one was like a constitutional law professor. He was very into like the history of Japan, the history of constitutional law, and then the constitutional individual rights and protections of Japan. Another professor was very into women's studies and gender studies, and then kind of impact of Japanese culture on the women workforce in Japan, and then what kind of laws are anti-discrimination and how Japan can improve its Japanese work productivity or work participation from Japanese women, and whether or not that's cultural. And then we touched on also current events such as splitting your name and the koseki. So it's a kind of a hot topic about how each couple has to choose which family name they're going to adopt when they get married, and whether or not it's unfair. And then we talked about Supreme Court precedents in Japan. I actually wanted to only work in Japan. I didn't really want to take summer school, but I emailed the school and asked if I could be exempted out of the doing business in Japan class and only extern, and I wanted to kind of work longer, but the school unfortunately told me that I wasn't able to. In hindsight, it was a good experience to do the class because we got to cover a bunch of different topics. We talked about criminal law, contract law, civil law, the constitutional law, and then just in general doing business in Japan. And so we had classes about importing, exporting, setting up entities in Japan, and then we even had a guest speaker from a Japanese law firm come to talk to us. The class was held at Hotel Asia Center in Aoyama Ichome, and then it was in one of the conference rooms. There was about 20 something students from around the United States. The vast majority of the students were from Santa Clara University. There was Georgia State, William and Mary, there was University of Oregon, Hawaii, just to name a few. And everyone had different reasons why they wanted to study in Japan. But for the most part, I think a lot of the students wanted to either get some international experience or they wanted to live and work in Japan after graduation. During the day, there was a doing business in Japan class, and that lasted from maybe 9 to 12:40-ish on most days. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, there was an afternoon session, so we would go to lunch and then we'd come back, and it would be like maybe 1 to 4-ish. And then there was a 1 credit class for IP law in Japan, and that was taught actually at a law firm by a practitioner, but I didn't do that one, so I don't really want to comment on it too much. A lot of my friends really like that class though, and Japan has really interesting nuances for their IP. One of the classes I thought was the most interesting was actually when we talked about criminal law, and so we talked about how people can get arrested, how they get arraigned, what kind of rights they have to an attorney or representation, because Japan notoriously has an extremely high conviction rate, and a lot of people I've heard anecdotally get stopped on the street and searched randomly. And there's constitutional protections, but it is kind of different out here, so I thought that was really interesting about the individual rights and amendment protections. So outside of class, I thought it was actually really fun, this program. So the school actually took us to various events. So we went to the Cup Noodle Ramen Factory, we went to the baseball game at Yomiuri Giants. And And then we also had a lot of free time. So we would end class midday, maybe around 12 something, and then we'd be able to have like hang out all afternoon. And on the weekends, me and my friends would go out a lot. So we would go to like bars and nightclubs, or we would go to restaurants. And then the food in Japan is just to die for. So I really liked being able to eat out a lot and then not have to pay the super expensive like San Francisco taxes plus the tipping in the United States. So it was actually nice to like be able to have this kind of more lavish lifestyle without actually having to pay as much as I would have if I stayed in San Francisco for the summer. So the class had one final, and then the final had different sections for every single professor, and they had different questions that we had to answer. Final was, I would say, much easier than the 1L classes, and it was kind of similar where they would give you questions and then you would have hypothetical kind of answer question and answers. Not as much multiple choice, but it was kind of more essay formatted. I ended up getting, I think, an A minus for the class, but I ended up transferring, so the credit grade didn't actually matter, but I was able to earn those 4 credits for my school. Getting an apartment in Japan is really difficult. I went with this company called Humlet Japan. It's a Singaporean company. I typically rent from them a lot every time I have a long stint in Japan. They're kind of like medium long-term rentals, and they're furnished, so it comes with the bed, bedding, furniture, like appliances, washing machine, and then it's usually really brand new and clean smelling, and so I really like living here. It's a little bit expensive though. This past time I stayed, I had to pay 586,838 yen, and that was from May to like August, and then you have to pay like a deposit and then a move-in fee and then a move-out fee. But I really liked having an apartment because you get kind of the flexibility of having your own space without having a share house, and then you're allowed to have guests if you have friends or family that you want to have stay over or crash or visit you. And it's extremely easy. You just have to show bank statements and then show that you have sufficient funds. And then since this time when I came it was kind of short, they just had me pay all up front, and then I was able to stay the entire time from May to August. A little bit more about my apartment. So I lived in a 1K, which is kind of like a studio out here. There was a lounge actually on the top floor where we could hang out, and some of my friends came over. Inside the apartment, you kind of had a hallway, the genkan, and then on the left side you had like the kitchenette, and then you had the toilet separated from the shower, and then you had kind of a newer bathroom, renovated bathroom kind of feel. And then I had to hang my laundry inside the bathroom, but I think that's pretty common out here. It came with even like cleaning supplies, so like a toilet wand. It came with like a Swiffer, floor mop, came with hangers like to kind of hang your clothes in the dryer like to dry. Then there was even like utensils, bowls, cups, dish rack, and various other household items that you might need. So like, and it was really convenient to kind of move in, and then moving out was super easy because I didn't have to sell anything or get rid of anything, really just like the stuff that I brought or I bought for kind of daily use. The apartment was located in Shibuya Shoto, and so I would walk to the Ginza-sen and then I would take that to Aoyama Ichome every day. I loved living in Shibuya. It was like super convenient, so you can go out, there's like a ton of restaurants, there's always people around, there's like a ton of shopping that you can do down the street. It was nice because Shibuya Shoto is kind of like outside of Shibuya, so you don't always kind of get a lot of the ruckus and the partying, and then there's not as much like vomit on the ground everywhere, but it was kind of close enough that I could walk home. I didn't need a cab, or I didn't need to like rush home for last train or anything like that, so it was quite convenient to live there. Another option the students had were to live, if they didn't rent an apartment like Humlet, is they got to live at the hotel, and there was a kind of like a student package discount offered by Santa Clara, and so this hotel was 8,000 yen a night for 65 nights if you were to do the class and the summer externship. And so some of the pros of being at the hotel is there's no commute to class, you just have to go downstairs. They also have breakfast or different kind of meal tickets. I would say also Aoyama Ichome is a very convenient location for lines, so if you want to go to Shibuya or you want to go to somewhere else on the Ginza-sen like Asakusa, it's pretty convenient. It's just like one stop, and there's also the Hanzomon line. But I would say the cons are you can't have guests or have anyone really stay over because usually the hotel doesn't let you. The room is pretty small. It's kind of like a smaller Japanese hotel. It's not as big as some of the American hotels. I think another con is if your externship isn't nearby the hotel, then it could be really far commute, and so you won't know that until you kind of have to make a decision of where to live. I think another con is there's not a lot in Aoyama Ichome. So where I lived in Shibuya, there was obviously a lot more stuff, a lot more kind of things to do, and bars and nightclubs and stuff around there. Near Aoyama Ichome, there isn't a whole lot, so you probably have to cab back to the hotel or different things like that. So after the schooling part was over, we got our externship assignments. So I was assigned to a law firm in Toranomon. That's kind of like in the middle of Tokyo, and I worked for a Japanese attorney, and he helped provide me assignments and supervise my research and writing and drafting. And so we had a ton of different assignments. We had a lot of employment disputes, or we had maybe conflict of law issues, we had tax issues, we had overall business transactions. And then he kind of walked me through Japanese corporation setups, Japanese entity filings, various issues in Japan, like what kind of cross-border issues there were in Japan. Every day I would work from about 9 to 6, Monday through Friday, and I worked about like 6 weeks. He even took me to a Japanese baseball game. So there was a Japanese corporation league where companies will kind of sponsor these various prefecture teams, and I went with one of his friends. I got to meet some of the other attorneys too, and it was a great experience. So everyone kind of did different kinds of law. So I got to hear about like Japanese bankruptcy, about copyright issues, about different kind of business aspects in Japan, I would say. And I think that was something unique about Japan that a lot of foreign companies need their Japanese lawyer specialties for. So I think this program would be really good to do as a 1L, because overall, hearing from other people, as a 1L, you don't do a whole lot. I did a lot more as my 2L summer, but for my 1L summer, I was able to do like researching, and I was doing a lot of writing, a lot of memos, a lot of legal issues. He had me draft a lot of letters, and then a lot of like client communication. So maybe a couple things that I want to talk about living in Japan, especially during the summer is insanely hot. If you cannot handle the heat, I would not come, because almost every single day it is like 95, 98 degrees, and then like almost 98, 100% humidity. And so the train is packed and everyone is sweaty. And a lot of times the morning rush hour traffic, it is insanely crowded. And I would often like brush up next to someone who's like super sweaty, or they honestly just smell bad. And it's kind of brutal, I would say, getting to and from work on the train when it is that hot and that crowded. So if you cannot handle the heat and you sweat a lot, I don't know if I would recommend working out here in the summer for a short stint, unless you really, really want that kind of Japanese law experience. Personally, I'm really happy with the overall experience. I was really glad to be able to be in Japan for a few months during the summer. I feel like it's really hard when you're going to law school. You don't really have an opportunity to have these long stints and breaks out here in a foreign country unless you were to do a program like this. And so I was able to do a lot of different things. I got to tour an American law school out here. I got to go to Odaiba. I got to go to Japanese summer festivals. I went to a fireworks festival, but then unfortunately I got canceled. We went to Shibuya a lot. We went to Shinjuku. We went clubbing. We went to all these different restaurants. So I'm a really big foodie. So I like to eat ramen. I like to have yakiniku. I like to go to different things like that. And then I even did a sushi making thing that one of my friends was working at. So we had a sushi chef, and then he kind of taught us how to roll sushi and make nigiri and different things like that. And then I went to round one. My brother came out and visited. A bunch of my friends came out to visit. And then one of my friends actually stayed kind of a long time. And we went to Sapporo and we hung out there for a few days, and we were able to kind of just hang out and explore Japan and like kind of have an extended period of time here that I probably won't actually get once I take the bar and start working full time. And so if you really want some kind of different life experience, different work experience, I really recommend this program. I think it's really fun. You learn a lot, and it's just a really great time to kind of hang out, experience, and live life in Tokyo. I will say though, when I was in the States interviewing for a 2L summer, a lot of employers to me did not care that I was doing that kind of experience. I didn't think a lot of people were very impressed that I had this foreign law experience. I think maybe if you got to work at like a government agency, or if you externed a clerkship in a court in your hometown or whatever your law school is by, that might be more prestigious and help you get a 2L summer better. I think if you want to live in Asia though, I think it will be a really good experience. So I actually have a bunch of friends that are thinking about working out here afterwards, and then they thought it was really cool that I was able to get this kind of work experience during college. And then I have another friend that she actually externed out here twice, so she did her 1L and 2L summer. Hopefully I'll get to interview her about her experience, and then she can kind of talk about what she liked about working in Japan, like where she worked, what kind of matters she did, and then what she's planning on doing after graduation. So thanks guys for watching. I'm going to make more videos like this talking about my own personal experiences, and then I'm going to try to add in some interviews of my friends that live and work out here in Japan. And so if you could comment on if you have any questions, or if you have anything that you want me to kind of touch on or talk about, and then maybe any kind of professions that you want me to interview and ask about, I'll be happy to do that. And until next time, thanks for watching.